Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Foreign news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please let's go to the headlines.
David Muir, ABC's World News Tonight, America's most watched newscast. Now streaming same day with all the breaking news of the day on Disney Plus. Most watched, most trusted. Now on Disney Plus every night.
Tonight, breaking news, the powerful winter storm pummeling multiple states right now. The newly released Epstein files, the images and famous names in the documents, and the immigration debate contributing to a partial government shutdown. First, that winter storm tearing through the southeast, life-threatening freezing temperatures for up to 160 million Americans, stretching as far south as the Florida Everglades. Some states still cleaning up from last week's storm, up to a foot of snow in the forecast. More than 2,000 flights canceled. Plus, a chain reaction crash in the west. Dozens of cars in the pileup. Our weather team tracking it all. The growing fallout for the millions of documents in the Epstein files, newly released images and communications between the rich and powerful, including former Prince Andrew. And our first look at the evidence against Epstein nearly 2 decades ago. Prosecutors calling him a continued danger to the community, but that 60-count indictment never filed. Epstein instead pleading to a lesser charge. Tonight, the survivors speaking out. Breaking news in the immigration crackdown. A federal judge ordering the release of a 5-year-old boy and his father detained outside their home in Minneapolis. And as protests continue, Homeland Security is asserting new powers for agents to make arrests. Also, the partial government shutdown, the battle over DHS funding at the heart of the dispute. What's affected this time? How long will it last? Tragedy at sea, the Coast Guard calling off the search for 6 crew members missing after their commercial fishing boat apparently sank in icy waters off the coast of Massachusetts. Olympic sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson arrested. Police say new video appears to show her speeding past a patrol car and later pleading with an officer not to arrest her. Time's up for travelers, why it could cost you more to fly if you don't have a real ID. Remembering actor Damon Wilson from the beloved 70s sitcom Stepped Up.
On this Saturday night, leadership landslide win. Conservatives vote overwhelmingly to keep Pierre Poilievre at the helm.
We know the best is yet to come.
Where the Tories go from here as Alberta separatism takes center stage. Paying tribute. Catherine O'Hara's Canadian co-stars react to news of her death. Unprovoked assaults. Police say a Toronto area woman was randomly beaten to death, while investigators believe there may be more victims. Plus, Valentine's Day for widows.
Speaking about grief and that stage of life also is vital.
How a Calgary woman's heartbreak turned into a campaign for healing.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with a resounding endorsement for Pierre Poilievre. The Conservative leader's future was put to a vote last night by party delegates, a mandatory review after losing last year's election to Mark Carney. Conservatives gathered in Calgary for the party's biannual convention, which wraps up this evening, and they voted overwhelmingly by more than 87% to stick with Poilievre. That's a stronger result than even Stephen Harper achieved during his leadership review 20 years ago. But winning over Conservative delegates is one thing. Earning the support of Canadians in a federal election is, of course, another matter. And Poilievre offered his vision on how he plans to do that. For more on all of this, David Aiken joins us now from Calgary. So, David, let's start with Poilievre's speech to the convention. What did you make of what you heard?
Well, after last year's election, there were a whole lot of critics outside the party and many inside the party that said Pierre Poilievre has to change. He needs to change his focus, change his priorities. Well, this is the message Poilievre had for his critics last night.
One of the most important lessons I have gained from listening to you throughout this convention is that you told us to ignore the voices who keep telling us to abandon our conservative principles. We will remain true to our principles.
Lots of applause on that line. And yet, Jeff, there have been some changes. And I'm going to look at that speech. Gone is the dumbed-down sloganeering we saw last year. No more axe the tax, build the homes, bring it home. That's out. And don't get me wrong, Poilievre is still focused on those core set of issues: affordability, crime, immigration. But he's talking now in a much more serious way. And why not? That's because Justin Trudeau is long gone. Slogans were built for him. Poilievre's opponent now is the more buttoned-down statesman like Mark Carney, and that has required a change in the way Poilievre is approaching politics, the way he's approaching communications, and we saw that last night.
But then does this victory essentially silence any further questions or doubts about Poilievre's leadership moving forward then?
Well, it was a resounding result here, but let's put those leadership numbers in context. 87.4% of the people in this room. That's not all conservatives, just the 2,900 delegates here. And in fact, we saw a lot of chirping between Ontario conservatives and what I'll call
aimed at destroying law enforcement, this case ICE and the Border Patrol, and our ability to remove criminals from our country. This is an intentional attempt by the Democrat Party to keep in this country all the people they brought into this country illegally. But I want to go through this step by step for a moment. Mr. Alex Preddy, who was killed, unfortunately, but the media have tried to turn him into a martyr. They do this all the time. But of course, all the people that have been murdered, raped, and so forth, assaulted by illegal aliens, they don't even know their names. So let's go through this point by point together. Number one, do not arm yourself with a gun and ammunition, extra ammunition, when going to any protest, let alone a protest organized by violent communist socialist groups using signal and encrypted communications, where you know the goal is to confront and obstruct federal law enforcement, which is a crime, by the way, from carrying out their lawful duties and their lawful orders. You can protest, but you cannot interfere. That's not a First Amendment right, period. And we know these groups, we know who they are now, thanks to Fox News Digital, and most of the rest of the media is ignoring it. They want you to think this is spontaneous, this is coming out of their neighborhoods. It's not. This is not a Second Amendment issue. You have the right to carry your weapon if you have a permit and an ID and other requirements of your state, like you have the right to drive your car with a driver's license. But how you conduct yourself with a gun or a car matters. Number two, do not interfere with law enforcement when you know the situation is dangerous and can easily escalate if you attempt to obstruct them. In fact, doing so is a crime. It has nothing to do with free speech or freedom to assemble. Period. Number three, when federal law enforcement is attempting to arrest an illegal alien who's committed violent and in some cases heinous additional crimes, do not interfere with or otherwise obstruct law enforcement from apprehending such fugitives. Again, this is a federal offense. Moreover, you might get harmed, you'll likely get arrested, and you might get killed. Number four, American citizens have a right to live in safe and secure neighborhoods. They have a right to expect local, state, federal law enforcement, in the case of illegal aliens, to protect them. And that includes removing these individuals from their communities. When governors and mayors order state and local law enforcement to stand down, they are protecting criminal illegal aliens, not the citizenry. And they are creating a very hostile living environment. The political demagoguery, in addition,
news, the headlines. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is under renewed pressure as the Prime Minister calls on him to testify after new photos are released from the Epstein files.
Where I must assert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights as provided by the U.S. Constitution.
Also amongst the latest material, thousands of videos, including one showing Epstein being questioned by prosecutors in 2010. Also ahead, explosions add to jitters in Iran, even as an official says progress is being made towards talks with the US. PM is flying back from his trip to China and Japan. We'll get political editor Beth Rigby's take on what was achieved. Plus in sports, a champion's performance. Liverpool come from a goal down to beat Newcastle 4-1 at Anfield. A very good morning to you. Convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein's links with the wealthy and powerful have once again been laid bare. Sky News is combing through millions of pages of documents and thousands of videos and photos released by the US Justice Department. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been scouring the latest batch of Epstein files.
High society, sordid crimes and the consequences of them. The latest release of millions of files is helping us build the fullest picture of Jeffrey Epstein's wretched life. Among them are these new images of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. They show him on all fours. In two of the pictures, he appears to be touching a woman's stomach, while the others show him looking straight at the camera. The photos appear without explanation, date, or further context, and there's no suggestion of any wrongdoing. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has always denied any allegations against him. But these files aren't just about lurid photos or ill-advised friendships. They document in precise detail exactly what Epstein did. One document here shows a list of some of the witnesses. It looks dry and methodical until you see the ages 17 years old for all these victims at high school. These were school children and they were abused hundreds of times. Other victims described being raped and beaten in graphic detail. Victims' journals are also included in the files. One victim took this pre-branded title, Flights of Fancy, and altered it. So it read Flights and Yachts of Horror. Those are just some of the shocking crimes that would form part of the later investigation. The documents also include an interview with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Did you ever give a massage to anyone other than Mr. Epstein at any of Mr. Epstein's properties?
That's why I never said I gave Mr. Epstein a massage.
I'll ask that question if you want, but I was focusing on people other than Mr. Epstein right now.
I didn't give massages.
Okay.
Prosecutors did repeatedly try to uncover the full truth of Epstein's crimes. The newest files contain a deposition of Epstein from 2010, part of a civil lawsuit.
Please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
He invokes U.S. constitutional amendments to refuse to answer questions.
How did you meet Ghislaine Maxwell? I intend to respond to all relevant questions to this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counsel me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit and must accept this advice or risk losing my right to effective representation. Accordingly, therefore, I assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right to the U.S. Constitution.
But authorities did eventually build their case.
Saturday, 8:30, or stream the full season on ABC iView.
Today, former Prince Andrew facing calls to testify in the US. New details emerge over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. And Yelena Kina writes her first in open S. Welcome to ABC News. I'm Melissa McKay. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is calling on former Prince Andrew to give evidence before a US congressional commission after new images were released in the latest tranche of documents relating to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The photos are among more than 3 million pages of documents, videos and images released yesterday by the US Department of Justice. They reveal the late financier had sought to build a wide network of high-profile contacts, including former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, whose office has insisted he met Epstein. North America correspondent Cayman Gok has more from Washington.
Epstein survivors have labelled this most recent release as outrageous, and they say the scale of failure from the Department of Justice is staggering. Defense statement that the detail women who were abused were included and not redacted in these files, but then the alleged abusers remain hidden and protected. This is apparently going to be the last major release of documents from the Department of Justice, despite it being 6 weeks late from the legal deadline they were supposed to release all this information. Survivors say that's not good enough, and they should continue revealing information and details until every abuser and flows. Public to uncover within Epstein files abused women, unfortunately. Another survivor said those comments were heart-wrenching, particularly because it raises questions about the true extent of this release. Now, the Department of Justice can withhold information to protect the identities of survivors and victims, and also if it jeopardizes any active investigations. But we know that in these files that were released, there are witness statements from survivors to the FBI. They're called 302 forms, and these survivors say that in these documents they detailed who these abusers were and the abuse that took place. And for years they have wondered what law enforcement did or did not do with that information they provided them. Those documents are in this most recent release, but are heavily redacted. Of course, there is more than 3 million pages of records, 180,000 images and 2,000 videos included in this most recent dump. And it's important to note that just simply appearing or being named in these files does not imply any wrongdoing. We know, though, from these files that there is evidence that in the 2000s, investigators were looking into Epstein's close inner circle, and at one point intended to try and charge 3 other co-conspirators. That didn't end up happening, and those names have been redacted. Then there is images and correspondence with the rich and famous. There is more images of the former Prince Andrew. There's a photo of him on all fours over a...
Africa News. The news.
Witnesses have accused Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces of kidnapping children during attacks in Darfur, including its capture of the city of Al-Fashir in October. They told Reuters news agency that at least 56 youngsters, ranging from a 2-month-old baby to teenagers, had been abducted in separate incidents. In some instances, they said the fighters killed their parents first, while in others, families were allegedly told their children would be used as slaves or to herd livestock. People who witnessed the kidnappings were often threatened or coerced, and some abducted children were used as leverage for ransom. The RSF has been at war with the Sudanese army since April 2023. Both sides have been accused by rights groups of war crimes, including the recruitment of child combatants. But this is the first time it's been reported that the RSF is abducting and enslaving children. The news agency said it's not been possible to verify the accounts or determine how many children might have been taken and what's happened to them. The war has killed tens of thousands of people and led to famine and disease in what the United Nations has called the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Tunisia's President Kais Saied has extended the country's long-running state of emergency for another 11 months until the 31st of December. The emergency law gives the authorities exceptional powers, including the right to carry out home arrests, ban official meetings, impose curfews, censor the media, and prohibit assemblies without permission from the judiciary. The state of emergency was first declared on the 24th of November 2015, following a bomb attack on a bus carrying the presidential guards. 12 agents died in the incident. It's remained in effect continuously since then, through repeated extensions. Hundreds of people took to the streets of Tunis earlier this month amid growing discontent over Said's increasingly authoritarian rule. In a sweeping power grab in July 2021, he suspended parliament and expanded executive power so he could write decrees. Then he jailed many of his critics. Said says his actions are legal and aimed at ending years of chaos and rampant transition football to suspend its coach Pap Chow for finding $100,000. This disciplinary board also imposed 2 bans on 2 forwards. Senegal's football was 100 headquarters. The ruling held in its Africa Cup of Nations final against Morocco earlier this month. Chow instructed his players to leave the pitch after a Senegal goal was disallowed, triggering a 14-minute stoppage in play. CAF ruled that the coach's conduct was unsporting and brought the game into disrepute. Senegal went on to win the Waters, Nicaragua, the forgotten dictatorship, on France 24.
Welcome back to Night Watch here on France 24. Our main stories for you this hour. Iran's top security official Ali Larijani says there's been progress towards negotiations with the United States over its nuclear and missile program as Washington built up its military presence in the Gulf. It comes as Egypt and Qatar have held high-level talks with Iran in a bid to de-escalate tensions and avert a fresh conflict in the region. Democrats and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes call on the Justice Department to release millions more files relating to his decades of abuse. It comes after the latest release of over 3 million pages and thousands of videos and images referencing various rich and powerful figures including Donald Trump, Bill Gates, and Britain's former Prince Andrew. And health officials in Gaza say at least 30 Palestinians are killed in Israeli strikes across the strip in the heaviest day of bombardment since an October ceasefire. Israel's military said it was in response to a ceasefire breach on Friday, in which it identified gunmen emerging from a tunnel in the Rafah area.
This is DW News, live from Berlin. The biggest release of Epstein files so far, but could there be even more to come? Victims of the crimes of late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein demand the release of millions more documents. Some Democrats call on the U.S. Justice Department to issue lawmakers with unredacted copies. Donald Trump bans Homeland Security from intervening in protests in cities led by Democrats unless requested. This as rallies are held across the country against president's immigrant crackdown and the killing of U.S. citizens.
World News Tonight, America's most watched news.
Headline news this hour. Clashes between Pakistani security forces and separatists in Balochistan province kill at least 120 people, including around 90 militants who targeted police stations and paramilitary posts. Pakistan's interior minister condemned the attacks and praised authorities for blocking attempts to seize control of any city. The UK and Japan agreed to deepen defense and security ties as Prime Ministers Keir Starmer and Sane Takaichi held talks in Tokyo. The British Premier's trip to Japan comes after a 4-day visit to China. Mr. Starmer invited Ms. Takaichi to visit the UK, though that trip will depend on the results of Japan's snap election next weekend. And a U.S. judge denies a request to halt immigration enforcement operations in Minnesota. Federal Judge Kate Menendez says arguments that the state was being punished or unfairly treated by the federal government were insufficient. Controversial deployment has led to the deaths of 2 U.S. citizens and the arrest of more than 3,000 undocumented immigrants. And that's the latest from the CNA Newsroom.
This is Asia Now.
It's 8 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 5:30 in New Delhi, and 7 o'clock in Jakarta. Good morning, I'm Rani Samtani. At this hour, clashes between Pakistani security forces and separatists in Balochistan province kill at least 120 people, including some 92 militants who targeted police stations and paramilitary posts. The UK and Japan agreed to deepen defense and security ties as Prime Ministers Keir Starmer and Sane Takaichi held talks in Tokyo. And a U.S. judge denies a request to halt immigration enforcement operations in Minnesota. The controversial deployment has led to the deaths of 2 U.S. citizens and the arrest of more than 3,000 undocumented immigrants.
Thank you for watching Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amish Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.